Welcome back to another episode of Nerd Social. This time we're going to be focusing on a little bit of role-playing. Today we're here specifically to talk about how to run a role-playing game and how to play a role-playing game. We have a nice group of people with us today. Let's start from on the right.
Hi everybody, my name is Jay Africa. I am a Los Angeles game master and dungeon master. I also write adventures for the D&D Adventurers League, as well as just pursuing various arts around Los Angeles.
I'm Lindsay Garber, and I am a role player.
I'm Justin Seuthe. I'm a GM, and I've run pretty much everything except for D&D, and I'm also a writer.
I'm Zack Garber. I play and teach board games.
Awesome. So the first thing I want to talk about is pretty much, planning out your game beforehand. Because, that's the first thing you do when it comes to role-playing. You don't start off with, jumping into confronting players and running into it. You have to have an idea of what you're going to do. Now, everyone here has either been in a game or run a game. So how do you plan out a story? How do you basically come up with the idea, the bare bones of what you're going to put these people through?
Personally, myself, I run a lot of published modules, and so a lot of the material is already outlined in the either the adventures that I purchase or the books that I buy. But I've run home campaigns a couple of times before, and when I first started DMing, I was really regimented in the story. Like, this is chapter 1, this is chapter 2, this is chapter 3. These are the decision points the players are going to get, and I learned really quickly that players will take games in directions that you don't expect. And so lately I've been I've been using overall themes. These are sort of the plot beats that I want the players to go, to experience, to encounter. So I'll have a series of individuals that I would like to introduce to them, as well as an overall idea of what the general conflict of the story is. And then I kind of let the players adventure around all that, putting the pieces together as they make their decisions throughout the game.
So yeah, I do a lot of improvisation as well. So I found that to use a military aphorism, no plan survives contact with the enemy, and no plan survives contact with players. So I do the same thing. I have a general outline. I have characters that I want to include. I'll do prep work for the session itself, but overall I just have a skeleton of an idea of what my plot line is going to be.
I never plan too hard to get from point A to point B. I just try to keep them headed in that direction as best I can. But sometimes the best stories come when the players don't do something you've expected.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So when it comes to the idea of basically, planning the story and kind of going through it, is it good to have more of a sparse skeletal system for what you're going to do, or is it do you want to specifically plan out okay, what happens if they go to this city? What happens if they go to that city?
You definitely want to have contingencies. So always, I like to think always, what happens if they accidentally kill someone here? Because more often than not, that's the issue that I run into. An aggressive party just kills somebody who's supposed to be important. Not always, but that's what I get.
And you can't do essential NPCs.
This character cannot be killed.
Yeah,
game over. Start over. Last checkpoint.
That's kind of a kick in the balls to the players. When they do something clever, but you punish them for it by not having it succeed.
Right.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer in that. You kind of have to let a player do things within the system. Mm-hmm. Being able to take that away from someone as they're trying to do something is really kind of just a jerk move, right?
Yeah.
The next thing I want to talk about, we've talked about story planning things out, sometimes using pre-designed modules, running off the cuff, you're making your own. How do you pick the system? So now, as someone who plays with a lot of systems, or basically has experienced a lot, sometimes you have other options. I want to run a game that's going to take place in medieval times. It's a sci-fi story, and you're like, what do I want to use? Do I want to go with Dungeons and Dragons? Do I want to go with Genesis? Do I want to go with GURPS? So how do you find the right system for the story? Or do you not really think of it that way? Do you do the system and then the story?
Generally, I've played system then story, like you mentioned, but I do have a couple of game systems that I kind of fall back on. I mean, D&D is very, very tailored towards high fantasy role playing, but there are other systems like Savage Worlds or Fate that are a little more tailored towards one shot or non-specific campaigns. Like I love Fate for modern day. Modern day scenarios, or just for scenarios that are such oddball things that it'd be kind of tough to shoehorn it into a system like Dungeons and Dragons or reskinning, say, Fantasy Flight Star Wars games. I mean, obviously, if you want to run a game in a specific IP, chances are there will be a game for that. Like Star Trek has its own role-playing game, Star Wars has its own role-playing game, and you can always take those. Yeah, exactly. And you can always take those and just tailor them for your own sci-fi setting, so on and so forth. A system that I really love that is very rules light and easy to pick up is the old West End Games Ghostbusters system.
Yes.
I don't know if any of you have played that, but basically like all the stats you need for a character in a card that big, and it's easy to roll off the cuff. The mechanics are great. They really provide for good story mechanics, and that's another one where you can just take the core mechanic and just use it in whatever setting you want.
Oh, I haven't thought about that. So usually when I think of like, oh, I need a system that can do anything, I usually lean towards GURPS.
Oh, sure.
But I'll have to look into that, just like kind of simple as Ghostbusters.
For me, if you want to do anything, just take out as much of the rules as you can, and really find something that has a good conflict resolution system.
Absolutely. By the way, West End Games Star Wars was my first role-playing game.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's awesome. And that's also built off their D6 system.
Right, yeah. Great system. I think the setting really kind of determines your system, because, high fantasy, D&D is probably your best bet. Some settings, like they have their system like Exalted, you have to use the Exalted system more or less. And then of course some settings already have a system created like Star Wars. So. I like kind of more narrative systems, like the new Genesis system is great if you want a universal system. Otherwise, I kind of stick with what the game is.
Yeah, right.
I've found that sometimes it helps to know the players that are going to be playing. Some of them don't exactly like to go entirely unscripted, in which case a system with more set in stone rules does help them to make their own decisions based off what their character is capable of.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that most parties will just adapt to what they have, at the ready.
So that kind of leads into my next kind of question I was going to ask you. So not all players are the same, and some players, they don't appreciate the story you're writing. So you've come up with an entire idea and a concept. You want them to fight, like say for instance the Emperor, or you want them to take out like this necromancer, or you want them to fight a troll in like this from some field. And you've got this whole story planned out, and they take it completely off the rails, and now you're in France. The game didn't even have France. But so at that point, what do you do as a GM do you want to kind of curtail that back? Is there a way to calmly curtail that back to the story? Or do you just at that point go, we're in France, everyone make bread?
I love France and bread. I mean, the key is just communicate with your players. And so to try to avoid getting to that problem when you start the game, definitely communicate with them and say, hey, what kind of game do you guys want? Or this is the kind of game that I want to run. I have a really plot-oriented game or storyline that I'd like to put you through, and you see if your players are into that or like are ready to buy into that. If their tastes sort of don't necessarily gravitate towards what you want to do at that moment, that's really up to you as a DM. You can either, again, talk to your players and say, hey, let's play a few more sessions of this and see where it goes. If you just kind of put a little trust in me, I'll make a great experience for you. Or you can, as a DM, just kind of shelve the ideas that you have, save that for another table, go with where the players want to go, and try to incorporate more elements in later on.
Yeah.
But again, communication is key. Just try to align yourselves with whatever they want. Otherwise, it may be just a matter of finding another table.
Or there's, as a player, I mean, you could persuade me somehow in the way of your story, and maybe you can say, oh, but this boring thing over here, but over here there is
That's the
riches
loot.
beyond.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way,
Yeah.
this necromancer has a lot of treasure.
Yes.
Yeah. And that comes back to knowing your players. Like
Right,
really
yeah.
knowing kind of what motivates them, what drives them, even
What
the
gets them
characters.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I kind of agree. Like, if you're a good improviser, you can always get the game back on track. You know, maybe the Emperor's in France now.
He's followed you.
Right. Yeah. And making bread is how you defeat him. So.
Yeah, this is bread bake-off
Oh, wait
challenge.
till we get to the part where we have to make the cheese. That's next.
Yeah.
And then chocolates? Oh, forget about
Right.
it.
Oh, he hates that stuff.
And just to piggyback off that too, that's why when I start planning games too, I think more about overall theme. Like, what's the tone? What's the theme that I want the characters to go through? What's sort of the you know, do I want them to face, you know, the evils of slavery? Do I want them to face, you know, someone oppressing orphans instead of
Right.
like a specific thing, something that I can take this idea, transplant it wherever I want it to be.
Exactly.
And I kind of hate to play devil's advocate here, but maybe a player is doing it maliciously.
It does happen.
There are times where a player does something ridiculous because he feels he's not getting enough attention. In which case,
Yeah.
you may want to do something for that character. Give them a little olive branch so that they don't stray things too far off
Let
the
them
side.
shine a little bit.
Let
Yeah.
them burn down a whole village.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah.
That actually kind of leads into the next
My
part.
players.
Wow, wonderful. I'm glad to be your segue.
That actually, you can help me out a lot with that. So, the next thing, this is really kind of an important discussion. I think it's probably going to be a little bit more of a meatier one. What do you do when a player, you've built the story, you've kind of come up with an idea, you've been playing the game for a little bit, and the players hate it? Right? You've been trying to go through it, and they're sitting there going like, how do you deal with that criticism? And is there a way to take it as constructive, or is it basically all like, we're done with this game?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a way to take it constructively. I mean, it just might be a matter of the wrong time and place. The players just aren't ready for that story, or that story that you're telling isn't quite resonating with them. I mean, and again, just that's a matter of communication. Are you guys not having fun with this particular game? Okay, well, let me, you know, as a DM, I would probably just say, let me just shelve that idea and find another group to run that with. Remember that when you play a game, I mean, there is that social contract that you're there to have fun with everyone. But you're also not necessarily tied down to that particular game, nor are your players tied down to you. In the end, it's all about having fun around the table. So if that means taking a break from one another or from the group, and finding a new batch of players or finding a new DM, then sometimes that's what happens. And you can always come back together and try another adventure, try another idea with one another, and see how that story goes.
See, that's a very mature response. I say you lock them in and you just force them to play your game until they're crying. No. But seriously, yeah, sometimes you have to shelve an idea. I agree with that. Sometimes it just doesn't gel. They're just not seeing it the way you're seeing it, and you just have to move on.
You're there for fun. If it's not fun, don't force them to it.
Yeah.
So the next part, and this is going to be a little bit more of the kind of the calm. We've already talked about how setting up and everything. Now it's you've got your story, you're ready to go. It's now on to getting the game played, right? I mean, it's one thing to come up with an idea, but it's another thing to actually put it into play. So of course, the first being where to find the players, right? Some people they have already a group that they basically play with. Other people they have an idea and they want to take it out and they want to try it out at, like, say for instance, like specific locations. So where do you find the people though? Like the people that you want to play with?
I play a lot of public games, and so I play predominantly at game stores and at conventions. That's kind of baked in. I've got a lot of people that I meet through that. But game stores are actually a great place to meet people. Drop in on a game that they're doing and introduce yourself, see how people play, pick out individuals that have the same, like a similar outlook or gameplay style as you. Yeah, exactly. And usually places like that will have community boards where you can post a looking for players or looking for game notice. If not a game store, coffee shops, libraries, those are great places to try to catch attention. If you want to go online, you can go to Craigslist. Sometimes people do that, post notices there. And if you're really having a tough time finding people in your area, sites like Roll20 or Warhorn will have like online games that you can play. You can always, try to start networking there and finding people in your area.
If you going off of that, if you like a really big game like that has a big following, D&D, Absolutely Exalted, Star Wars, on the forums, there's always like, hey, looking for players in such and such place.
Yeah, it's tough because there's a commitment that comes to these games.
Yeah.
It's roughly 3 hours a session. You want to meet at least once every 2 weeks, if not once every week, because after a certain point, if you're not playing the game, people forget details or the story loses its meaning.
Lose momentum.
Yeah,
exactly.
So if you're looking for people that want to have that kind of a commitment, usually they are already looking for you as well.
So also, I've done meetup.com and I've tested various games through that, and I mean, obviously by the name, they're looking for people to play. When I first started to think about Dungeons and Dragons, I went to a comic book shop. And there's also an awesome day called International Tabletop Day, which happens once a year, and that's a good day to meet up with people at the various locations, which you can search the website, and usually comic book shops will host and have free games for you to play, and that's another great place to meet people.
Yeah, no, those are great places.
Community colleges. Or like colleges are also great settings to meet people.
I've completely forgotten about community colleges.
Yeah.
I try to block that out of my mind.
Oh, sure.
I don't ever want to go back.
Sure, no, I hear you. But I mean, like a lot of them have,
college.
a lot of them will have like
I
gaming
hate
groups
schools.
and gaming organizations, clubs, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Even if you're not necessarily into that, you can just post a flyer and say, hey, looking for players, get in touch, send it to me.
So the one thing that actually kind of plays into that, actually, good segue for me on that, is when you find people, maybe they're not people that you've played with before, or they're a newer group, how do you deal specifically with conflict that arises between players in a game? Like, say, like, two people don't get along.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's a tough one. Again, communication is going to be the key. If you see sort of things bubbling up and kind of bad blood forming between people, set them aside. Set one person, talk to them individually and say, hey, I'm noticing you two aren't really there are some conflicts that are kind of getting in the way of our fun, getting in the way of the game. Is there anything that you need to handle with these folks? I mean, as the person running the game or hosting the game, just try to keep things open between your players as well. And again, if a player is being too disruptive and is not listening and isn't really following that social contract, give them a warning. If that continues on, you may have to boot a player.
Yep.
It happens.
Sometimes, yeah.
Even if you're a player and you see another player acting in such a way, don't think that this is only a DM issue. Bring it to the DM's attention, and he might be able to do something about it before it gets too bad.
There is a little bit to say about issues that can form between players and characters. So, for instance, like I've actually there's a person that we play with that I consider him a good friend now. But when we first started, I didn't really like a lot of the personality traits he had and the way he played the characters, and so we actually did butt heads a lot in person and in game. And as we just played along, eventually we got a couple characters that, because of the way they were designed and how we're so like into the idea of actually playing the characters as the characters would act, those characters became friends. Because a different game with a different scenario made them be all like, now we're friends, we're allies. And like those situations where you basically, if these people are actual role players, if they're really interested in playing the characters as they are, if you can find a way to find those two characters a common ground in which those characters would be friends, usually the players can form a better friendship from it as well.
Yeah, this is very true.
Yeah, that's an interesting mirror aspect of it. So true.
The good old days.
But that's happened to me where I brought up with the DM that I wasn't meshing well with another player, not his character per se, but another player, and I just said I just want to step down, and so however it is to finish this game, I'll be the bigger person to, get my character out of it for the sake of the other players. You don't want to just like abandon all. It is best to communicate. And it ended up working out in my favor, but it turns out other people had issues with that player as well, and they didn't speak up. So, other people might be thinking the same thing you are, and like you said, communication.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the theme of today is good
Communication.
communication.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, when it comes to role-playing games, isn't that what they are?
Right.
Yeah, it's everybody.
Telling a story
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, right, precisely.
With Vadida's specific location, that's probably the last thing I want to talk about right before we finish up here. Location. So when you do a thing at a public game where you play it like at a comic book store or like a community college, you kind of have a location.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have kind of like a home game, a game where you basically play with your friends at a separate location, sometimes those locations can change and move.
Mm-hmm.
How do you deal with making sure everyone's able to get to the same place, the same time, that's comfortable for everybody?
Oof.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of the online joke, right? It's like,
Right.
oh, we're all available in a year to play again.
Yeah, right.
I mean, once you answer that question, get back to me.
Yeah.
Oh, fair enough.
The best that you can do is just probably make your home available, make it clean, make it comfortable, provide some necessities, food and drink, so that people will enjoy.
Bathroom.
Yeah,
Right.
that too. So that people will enjoy being at your place. I mean, if you are the one hosting the game, you can't really expect one of your players to always have their home available. That onus is kindly on you, but
It also helps if you're a really nice cat, right?
I will tell you, a cat helps.
Unless they have allergies.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I host at my place every other week a game with some of my friends, and since I have my own place, it's very easy for me. But we also have another person in San Francisco who joins us, so we even put it on Discord and we call him in.
Oh,
And
sure.
it's also how much you love the game. You'll make time if you love the people that you're gaming with and the
Mhm.
game that you're playing.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
And if you can't make it to a location, there is an online substitute. There
Yeah.
are online tabletop programs like
Right.
Roll20.
Discord.
Well,
I have not been
yeah.
able to get those to work.
Even I've heard
I'm
of parties
not
playing
tech-savvy.
through Google, Google
Skype.
Voice or whatever it is, or Skype. Yeah, exactly. Skyping a player in.
Like
Yeah.
Skyping a
Yeah.
bunch of players in and having like you don't have to even go anywhere. You just
Right,
do
yeah.
everyone from the home in their
Sure.
underwear.
yeah.
People do
yeah,
that,
exactly.
No pants.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Ding and no pants. That
best
sounds awesome.
gaming,
Right?
right
Well, I
there.
just don't wear pants anymore.
Fair enough. I think that was a really good discussion. I really thank you guys all for being here.
Thank you.
I want to make a shout out real quick. We are filming again at 7 Deadly Fairies in Pasadena, 2725 East Colorado. Please make sure to stop by. They have some really amazing stuff. If you see anything in the background that you like, come in, purchase it, or just go to 7deadlyfairies.com and purchase it there. Additionally, I'm going to give everyone a chance to shout out what they care about, what they want to talk about. We'll start on the right again.
Hi, so once again, my name is Jay Africa. You can follow me on Twitter at JAfrica or Instagram at TransplantAsian. My Facebook, profile is public. If you have any questions about D&D or role-playing games, feel free to send me a friend request and a message. I do a lot of writing for D&D. You can find most of my adventures at the DMs Guild. That's dmsguild.com. And also, I've been working with Geek and Sundry as a guest on Game the Game, where we are playing through Betrayal Legacy, all 13 chapters. You can catch that on YouTube, on the Geek and Sundry channel, or on Alpha.
Awesome.
I'm Lindsay Garber. You can catch me each Wednesday on Nerd News Social with the latest comic book post or funny memes. Also, you can catch me on most of the main social networks at LNZ Designs. Plus, I stream live art and video games on Twitch and YouTube, LNZ Designs.
I'm Justin Seuthe. Be sure to check out The Adventures of Junebug, our new podcast on Nerd News Social. Very good, great story. Thank you.
I'm Zack Garber. I play a lot of video games, and sometimes I stream them under Twitch TV/TheBlueFoxy.
Well, thank you guys so much, and we'll see you guys next time.